to the A Train video live stream podcast. Yes, this show will be on podcast as well too. But I want to take the time to say thank you to all those who chimed in on my reels, whatever you want to call them, that were on TikTok. Also posted some on YouTube as well too. I got a lot of feedback. Some good, some not so good, but that's what I expect, especially when you mention certain names. And yes, we're going to be talking about the WNBA again. We're going to be mentioning names like Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell. Yeah, you mentioned Kelsey Clark, and everybody just explodes. So we're going to try to bring some perspective. But tonight, I want to talk about the WNBA's bigger than unstoppable. I was going to turn some heads. I was going to turn some heads. It's going to open up some ears. But I want to say that whatever I do say tonight, I stand 10 toes down on what I say. And no, I'm not saying anything derogatory, contrary to popular belief. I'm going to go ahead and put it out here like this. Do I like Caitlin Clark? Yes, I like Caitlin Clark. Do I like Angel Reese? Yes, I like Angel Reese. Do I like Asia Wilson? Yes, I like Asia Wilson. But I'm going to say it like this before I even get into my notes. Some of you newcomers to the game, y'all have the slightest bit of clue of the groundwork that was laid. To the old timers, the reason a lot of them said that they didn't want to watch the game because it wasn't a men's game. It wasn't physical. It wasn't athletic. It wasn't this. It wasn't that. It was something missing in the women's game that the men's game offered. What I can tell you is that when the league started, it didn't have social media. It didn't have this internet craze. It didn't have a bunch of keyboard warriors rambling on. That's what it didn't have. It had women that were dedicated to the game. So from Don Staley's 1996 legacy to Caitlin Clark, Aja Wilson, and the battle for the league's identity, the WNBA has never been more visible. The arenas are louder. The television audience are larger. The stars are becoming household names. Social media has turned every game, every quote, every controversial call, and every player interaction into a national conversation. But with that growth has come something else, a battle over how the WNBA should be understood. Is this a league driven by one superstar, two superstars, a handful of personalities, or is the real story much bigger? Because while Caitlin Clark has undeniably, can't, can't deny it, brought an enormous attention and amount of attention to women's basketball, the WNBA did not begin with Caitlin Clark. That right there has ruffled some feathers already. It did not begin with Asia Wilson. It did not begin with Angel Reese. And I know a lot of people have something not so nice to say about her. It did not begin with Sabrina Ionescu. The roots of today's WNBA can be traced through generations of players who built the sport long before social media could turn a basketball game into a cultural event. And few people represent that history better than, are you ready for this? Don Staley. In 1996, Staley was part of a United States women's Olympic team that went 60-0. I believe this might have even been during the time where the U.S. men's team was having a hard time. But she was part of a United States women's Olympic team that went 60-0 during its preparation and Olympic run, including a perfect 8-0 record in Atlanta. That team was recently enshrined in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame as part of the class of 2026. And that is where this current WNBA conversation needs to begin. Because the league may be arguing about individual stars today, but women's basketball has always been bigger than one star. Do I need to say that again? I think I will say that again. Because the league may be arguing about individual stars today, but women's basketball has always been bigger than one star. Ouch. So let's talk about Don Staley and the generation that built the future. Before Don Staley became the championship winning head coach at South Carolina, before she became one of the most recognizable figures in women's college basketball, she was a point guard helping define an era. The 1996 USA Women's Olympic team was loaded. Some of you old timers can help me with this one. Jennifer Azzi, Ruthie Bolton, Teresa Edwards, Venus Lacey, Lisa Leslie, the first woman to dunk in a game, Rebecca Lobo, Katrina McClain, Nikki McCray, Carla McGee, Katie Steady, Cheryl Swoops, and Don Staley. This wasn't simply a collection of talented basketball players. It was a statement. The United States went 8-0 in Atlanta and captured Olympic gold, continuing a dominant run that helped elevate the visibility and credibility of women's basketball on the international stage. In other words, it would seem like international stage accepted them before the U.S. stage did. The 1996 team is now recognized by the Basketball Hall of Fame, as one of the foundational teams in sports history. For Staley, the 2026 Hall of Fame honor is especially significant. She was already individually inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame in 2023. Now she has another Hall of Fame connection, not simply because of what she accomplished individually, but because she was part of a team that helped change the trajectory of the sport. That distinction matters because the WNBA's current explosion didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen overnight. There were players before Clark, there were players before Wilson, there were players before the current generation. And those players deserve to be part of the conversation. But now there's a question floating around. Was Asia Wilson's championship a fluke? Yeah, we're fast forwarding to the present because Asia Wilson and the Las Vegas Aces won the WNBA championship after a season that looked anything but conventional. The Aces struggled early. They were 14-14 through the first 28 games. Then something changed. Las Vegas went on a remarkable closing run, winning 25 of its final 28 games before ultimately capturing the championship. That should be remembered as one of the great turnarounds in recent WNBA history. But WNBA analyst Rachel Demeter recently offered a very different interpretation. There's always one, and sometimes that one can usually be the loudest voice. She said she didn't think the Aces should have won the championship based on how they performed throughout the entire regular season and described the title run as feeling kind of like a fluke. Kind of like a fluke. She said she didn't think the Aces should have won the championship based on how they performed throughout the entire regular season. And that's where the debate gets interesting because there is a difference between saying the Aces weren't the best team from start to finish and saying their championship was a fluke. Let's weigh out this difference here. The Aces weren't the best team from start to finish, as opposed to saying their championship was a fluke. Those aren't the same argument. However, a championship isn't awarded for having the best record after 28 games. Let's rewind this. What happens if they start off 28-0 and then goes 14-14 down the stretch and lose in the first round of the playoffs? See the difference? It isn't awarded for having the prettiest regular season statistical profile. It's awarded by surviving the postseason. The Aces didn't accidentally win 25 of their final 28 games. They didn't accidentally navigate playoff pressure. And they certainly didn't accidentally win the championship. That's a legitimate basketball argument. But calling the championship itself a fluke opens a much bigger question. What exactly do we value when winning greatness in the WNBA? But now, as we move forward, Caitlin Clark always manages to be the story, but she isn't the whole story. Right about there, I feel some pounding going on upside my head. I hear all the Caitlin Clark fans only. How could you say that? That is so blasphemous. You don't even need to be doing a live stream. You need to be off the air. I'm just like those of you who are going to have comments for me. You have the freedom to type what you want to type. I have the freedom to say what I want to say. And as I said at the beginning, whatever I say, I stand 10 toes down on what I have to say. I'm not saying anything disrespectful about Caitlin Clark. I already told you, I like Caitlin Clark. But I'm going to say this about Caitlin Clark. We're going to get on with the story. I said on my last show, she is not top five. To add more clarity to it, yes, I recognize the fact that she's the number three scoring, ranked number three in scoring per game in the WNBA. I get that. I get the fact that she's averaging 8+ assists a game. That puts her at the top of the list. But in order to become great, you have to become a two-way player. She's still a defensive liability. And you can't gloss over the fact that she's a turnover machine. Here's what I will say to ease your mind. If she polishes up her defense and cuts down her turnovers, Caitlin Clark can own the league and not just based off of the fan base. Do I need to say that again? She polishes up her defense, cuts down the turnovers. go along with her offensive skill set, she can own this league. Until then, I'm going to say it again. Caitlin Clark is not top 5. Top 10, hard maybe. Top 15, easily, hands down. Did I say anything derogatory about her, Caitlin Clark? No, I did not. I said what I feel. And I know some of you are going to feel different. You have the right to feel that way. But let's be honest. Clark has changed the business conversation surrounding women's basketball. Her popularity has brought new viewers. Can't deny that. Her jersey has become one of the most recognizable in professional basketball. The Indiana Fever, now we address the team, has become one of the most recognizable in professional basketball. The Indiana Fever have become one of the league's most discussed franchise. And whether people love her, criticize her, because there are going to be those that do, defend her, definitely those out there that do that, or question her place among the league's elite, guess what? People may as well stop lying because you're watching. Plain and simple. The TV numbers show that you're watching. All those out there that are going to be typing saying, I don't watch it, you're lying. You watch it. That matters. Let me get back to where I was at. Once again, that does matter a lot. But attention and basketball dominance are not the same thing. Once again, attention and basketball dominance are not the same thing. And that's where Sandy Brondello's comments became important. Because now this is Sandy Brondello. We can't say this is a race thing now. Because I've seen some of the comments. Let me bring your attention to what's called the Newsbreak app. A lot of the comments are racially charged. I read them. I try to stay away from it because at the end of the day, basketball should not, I repeat, should not be about the color of one's skin. Let me reference Martin Luther King real quick. Then we're going to get back to this. He said, don't judge me by the color of my skin, judge me by the content of my character. Caitlin Clark should not be judged by the color of her skin, but by the skills that she display on the basketball court. Angel Reese is in the same category as Caitlin Clark. And I know some of y'all are going to hate me for saying that. But she should not be judged by the color of her skin, but by the skills she displayed on the basketball court. And to those of you who are still comparing apples to oranges, let me set this record straight. Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese play two different positions on the court. Caitlin Clark is a guard, Angel Reese is a forward. If you want to compare Caitlin Clark to somebody, compare her to someone like let's say, Paige Buchers. And there's a young man that left comments that said that Paige Bucher and Ozzie Fudd's fans are worse than Caitlin Clark fans. And I'm going to save that for another show. And I hope he gets wind of this. I want to mention his name, but right now I don't have his name up here to mention. But back to what Sandy Brondello's comments how they became important. The Toronto Tempo head coach recently addressed the attention surrounding Clark and the Fever and made a point that shouldn't be controversial, but somehow has become part of the controversy. If I want to reference it, I could say that Caitlin Clark's middle name should be Caitlin Controversy Clark, triple C. And I'll even say this to her defense. Did she ask for this? No. When she accepted her Time Magazine award for great athlete and the comments she made, and people turned their backs on her because she paid homage to those in the past that paved the way for her to be where she's at, to give her this platform. Did she ask for all this racially motivated stuff and all this political backdrop? All she wanted to do was simply play basketball without all the drama. Brondello acknowledged that Clark is an amazing player, and nobody is denying that. I hate to have to keep emphasizing this because y'all are going to take some of my comments out of context and make it what y'all want it to be. But can I tell you something? You may whip me, but I guarantee you I'm not furnishing a stick. Once again, Brondello acknowledged that Clark is an amazing talent, but she also pointed to Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston. For those of you who have forgotten, those are also her teammates. Then she made the larger point. The WNBA isn't driven by one or two players. It's driven by all the great players in the league. That's not anti Caitlin Clark. That's not anti Caitlin Clark. Let me say that again because it sounds good to say that. That's not anti Caitlin Clark. And I know about 100 of y'all are going to disagree. But that's fine. You have the right to do that. It's a reminder that Clark doesn't need to carry the entire WNBA on her back like some of y'all want her to do. Y'all want her to carry this league, and she simply just can't do it. She wasn't designed to do it. You'll probably hear this later on in the show. Michael Jordan wasn't designed to carry the NBA. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, when they came into the league together, they weren't designed to carry the league on their backs. But here's the point. Caitlin Clark, she can be a transformational superstar without becoming the sole definition of the league. That's the whole point right there. Which now brings me to what is it that Asia Wilson deserves? She deserves to be part of the center of the conversation. And this is where I believe the WNBA conversation sometimes gets lost. Asia Wilson isn't a supporting character in somebody else's story. She's a superstar. She's a champion. She's one of the defining players of her generation. And when you talk about the best basketball player in the world, Wilson belongs in that same conversation. The same is true for players across the league. Ready for the list of them? Because I'm going to give it to you. Breonna Stewart, Nafisha Collier, Alyssa Thomas, Jonquel Jones, Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, Enrique Agumboe, Jackie Young, Chelsea Gray, and the list continues. The WNBA has an extraordinary amount of talent. And I hate to say this to the Caitlin Clark fans only, but you cannot deny that. And that's precisely why Brondello's argument matters. The league should be able to celebrate Clark without diminishing Wilson. It should be able to celebrate Wilson without diminishing Clark. In the words of Rodney King, to all of those you who were filled with animosity over some of the things I've said, Rodney King said like this: "Can't we just all get along?" Can't we just all get along? Because sports is the one thing I remember used to bring us all together. We may have rooted for different teams, but we were nowhere near toxic as today's generation. It should be able to celebrate Angel Reese without turning every discussion into a comparison with Clark. I think I already said that. And it should be able to recognize the contributions of veterans whose careers helped create the platform today's stars are standing on. That's what growth should look like, not replacing one narrative with another. In other words, expanding the narrative. So the WNBA's current drama is part of its growth, but it can't become the product. The WNBA is currently experiencing something women's professional basketball has never experienced at this level: massive attention. And we've already named some of it, but may as well throw the bad officiating in there because that's also part of the conversation. But with attention comes scrutiny. The league is dealing with debate about player treatment, officiating, social media, race, gender, sexuality, inclusion, and the intense personalities surrounding the sport. Yes, and one of the things on that list that I didn't mention in here, yeah, that talk about transgender athletes. Let me be more specific because I'm going to talk about it on my next show. Transgender biological male athletes. I'm not going to get too deep into that. I'm going to save that ammunition for my next show. WNBA legends recently acknowledged that some of the controversy surrounding the league is part of the growing pains that come with greater visibility. That's an important distinction. The WNBA doesn't have to run away from the controversy, but it also shouldn't allow controversy to become the primary product. The basketball has to remain the center because eventually the noise fades, the tweets disappear, the outrage cycle moves to another story, but championships remain, records remain, legacies remain, and the basketball remains. That's why the league's greatest opportunity may be to take all of this attention and turn it into deeper appreciation for the game itself. So now from 1996 to 2026, the connection is right in front of us. This may be the most important part of the entire conversation. Look at where women's basketball was in 1996. And I don't expect you young people to get all of this. Y'all are a new crop of fans. Y'all have a whole new different mindset. Some of the names I mentioned earlier, you probably won't even take the time to go back and look in the history books to see just what they had to go through for this league to be what it is today. But look at where women's basketball was in 1996. Then look at where it is today. Dawn Staley was a player. Lisa Leslie was a player. Cheryl Swoops was a player. Rebecca Lobo was a player. They were trying to prove that women's basketball could command the same respect, investment, and attention given to the men's game. 30 years later, the women who helped build that foundation are entering the Basketball Hall of Fame. And the league they helped inspire is now one of the most talked about professional sports properties in America. That's not a coincidence. The WNBA exists because generations of women kept pushing the sport forward. And now Clark, Wilson, Reese, Boston, Mitchell, and the rest of today's stars are responsible for pushing it in to the next era. That is the real story. Not Clark versus Wilson, not veterans versus rookies, not one fan base versus another. That reminds me, once again, that young man who dropped that nugget. That's going to be included on my next show, too. Who has the worst fan base? Is it the Caitlin Clark only fan base versus the Paige Buchers Ozzie Fudd fan base? Yeah, we're going to talk about that in the very near future. But it's generations. One generation built the foundation, another expanded the league, and this generation is taking women's basketball somewhere we haven't seen before. So, what should the WNBA be? Here's the question I want to put on the table. What do we actually want the WNBA to become? Or do we want a league where the biggest star helps bring people through the door and then the quality of the entire league keeps them there? I choose the second. Caitlin Clark can be a superstar. A'ja Wilson can be a superstar. Angel Reese can be a superstar. Sabrina Ionescu can be a superstar. And then there can be another superstar waiting to emerge next season. That's not a problem. That's the business model. The NBA didn't become successful because there was only one star. It became successful because generations of stars created generations of fans. Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Stephen Curry, Shaquille O'Neal, Charles Barkley. Different eras, different personalities, different playing styles, one league. That's where the WNBA has an opportunity to go. So, this is bigger than Caitlin Clark. So, when we talk about Caitlin Clark, let's talk about basketball. Let me say it again. When we talk about Caitlin Clark, let's talk about basketball. When we talk about A'ja Wilson, let's talk basketball. When somebody questions a championship, let's debate the basketball. When Sandy Brondello says the league isn't driven by one or two players, let's understand the larger point. And when Don Staley walks into the Hall of Fame for the second time, let's remember what that moment represents. It represents history. It represents sacrifice. It represents a 1996 Olympic team that helped change the trajectory of the sport. And it represents a bridge between generations. The WNBA doesn't have to choose between Caitlin Clark and A'ja Wilson. It doesn't have to choose between its veterans and its young stars. It doesn't have to choose between history and the future. Why? Because it needs all of them. Because the WNBA's greatest strength isn't that it has one superstar. It's that it finally has enough stars, enough history, and enough talent to tell a much bigger story. Don Staley and the 1996 Olympic team helped build the foundation. A'ja Wilson and today's champions are protecting the standard. Caitlin Clark and the next generation are expanding the audience. And somewhere between all of those stories, the future of women's basketball. That's the real WNBA story. It's bigger than one star. It's bigger than one championship. It's bigger than one controversy. That's the WNBA. Thank you for joining the ride. A-Train Video Stream Podcast. Keep your comments coming. I enjoy them. Good, bad, and indifferent. Because without you all out there, there's no me. So for that, I say thank you. Until the next ride, keep your ticket because it's reusable. We're going to enjoy this journey. Your host and conductor, Anthony Smith. Till next time, stay locked in the game.